Modern applications are generally built with SPA frameworks and they have users. Knowing how to combine the two is pretty important. Today I'm going to show you how you can authenticate your SPA application with .NET. We're going to cover 3 scenarios, and as a bonus at the end I'm going to show you an idea of how you can instantiate your user information without making that additional HTTP request. Welcome to the Raw Coding YouTube channel. My name is Anton. Let's take a look at the following example we have here. We have 3 scenarios: together, separate, and a server-side rendering framework. Together is when you have your .NET Core application and through the same URL that is being on the same domain, you are also getting your SPA application. So your SPA application goes through your ASP.NET Core application. Then you have the separate scenario. This is essentially emulating 2 separate domains. So let's say your domain is example.com, API sits on api.example.com, app sits on app.example.com. And then there is server-side rendered framework. This simulates the app being on 2 separate frameworks as well. However, with both separate and SSR Framework development environments, by the end, when you're actually deploying to production, you can use reverse proxies like Nginx to hide them behind the same domain. However, with the server-side rendering framework example, we're going to focus on what you need to understand when you're sending cookies, because there is that Node.js server element there. So you have 2 backends when you're rolling with server-side rendering frameworks. Let's take a look at the together example first. Here we will have a reactjs application. And here's our initial setup. We have authentication with authorization, our middleware, and 2 endpoints, one for logging in and one for retrieving some kind of protected information. I'll open up together in a terminal and we'll start this with .NET Watch no hot reload. The application starts there, and then with reactjs we can run npm run dev, or I think it was start, and there we have it. Now they are running on 2 separate domains. The example here is that the React app should be rendered from this domain. Let's come back here, and I have multiple videos that explain how to do this, so we will do this again here. What you're looking is for SPA services.extensions package. Let's go ahead and add that to the together sample, or rather project. What this package allows us to do is proxy requests to our development server for our SPA application. So this URL right here, the way that you proxy it, we add an additional piece of middleware, use SPA, and then here you will have a builder which you can use proxy to SPA development server. You grab your URL, you place it over here, and you're almost done. If you would be using a regular MVC application, you pretty much would be done here. I've explained in my other videos how build essentially does a little bit of pre-building middleware for you. This is why we would have to extract the middleware that has pre-built and restore the order of the middleware, where we're saying, look, we're going to use routing, we're going to use endpoints, but after it, we're going to use SPAs. If you just use SPAs over here, your endpoints, they will never let calls through to your SPA. Here we'll just supply an empty lambda function essentially. Because I've added a new package, I'm just going to restart my application. And now from our .NET Core application URL, we have the React application running. One thing that you need to watch out for is the automatic reload or hot module replacement isn't going to be working, so I'm going to be refreshing the page. If you want to have this set up, you basically have to point your hot module replacement to the same URL as your .NET Core application. How to do that? Well, you will have to Google it. Basically, depending on what development server each individual application is using, that is going to vary. So we want to log in and test the authenticated endpoint. I'm going to go into app.js over here, and I'm not a React developer, so hopefully I'm not going to mess this up too much. We want a login function, and we are just going to use fetch. So in my previous video where we were going over cookie authentication, I said use JS example, lift that, and just put that in your SPA application. And that is essentially what we're going to do. We're going to go to API/login. This will be a method post, and that's it. We will then also have a test endpoint. This is going to be method regular. Well, regular method is get. Let's have a button. This will be login, and on here you have on click login, and there we go. Then it's test and test. There we have the two buttons. Let's come back here, refresh, and there we have it. In the network tab, I will clear everything, and let's just make sure that I don't have any cookies in my application tab. I do have, so let's quickly clear those, and I'll press login, and there we have it. So cookie is appeared, or rather added to the browser, and if I refresh, it is still there. So on the network call, localhost, on the initial request, that is the HTTP request where we are just navigating to the URL, cookie is attached, and then if I call test, cookie should be attached with it as well. Perfect, that is pretty much all you need to do here. Let's go to the application and clear it for our next example. Dropping down the Together project and opening up the separate one, let's run this application. So .NET Watch, no hot reload, and for this application sample, we have solidjs. This was my first time trying solidjs, and it is pretty good. I almost love it as much as I do Vue. And here, let's do npm run start. Here we have essentially two examples. So with separate, they will be running on separate domains. So at the moment, one is running on an IP address of port 3000, and then one is running on localhost with a different port. So we have two variables that are mismatching. And basically until you actually match localhost with localhost here and you get HTTPS going on your SPA application, you are not gonna be able to do anything, and you're gonna keep running into course issues. And if you wanna see what this looks like, let's take a look. In app.jsx, I will again set up the login functions. Here we have the login button. So what we're going to do here is essentially go step by step, encounter an error, try to solve it, encounter an error, and try to solve it. Just so you know, if you're encountering these errors, you know how to solve them. We don't have a cookie. If we go to the network tab, and first of all, if we try to log in 404, there is no such page on this login, right? Because we need to be targeting our ASP.NET Core application. Let's place the URL over here and we will try again. So refresh, login, and now we have a course error. The course error is going to be maybe a little bit confusing, but that is going to be because there is a lot of cross-origin things that are happening here. I don't know how else to describe it, but first of all, let's solve the course issue. What is happening over here is we have a credential that should be attached, which is a cookie. And then we have cross-domain communication. So we want to say that we want to allow communication from this domain, and we want to allow having credentials. The way that you do this is, first of all, you set up use course, and then let's grab the domain, and you set up a policy. So in Builder, services, add course, you have your options, and then in here you add a policy. I'll just say FE for front end, and before I forget, you need to say that you're using this policy over here. Semicolon, and then we have the policy builder, where in the policy builder we want to say with an origin, this specific one. And this is going to be a big problem if you don't do this straight away. Make sure you don't have the slash on the end. That is going to cause you tons of problems if you do. Then you want to say allow credentials, and then you can say any method and any header. You cannot say with any origin if you're allowing credentials. Allowing credentials is for allowing cookies. Okay, let's come back over here. We will refresh, clear everything, and log in. Here the request is successful. However, the cookie that is being dealt out here, and if you watched my video about cookies, you're gonna know why this cookie is not gonna be saved to the browser, right? So if I even reopen this, it's not a lag with the browser, it's actually not being saved. Why? Because first of all, we're not secure, and there is a secure flag. And then same site is set as lax, we are on a different site. We wanna be on the path of the localhost domain. So we need to switch to being secure, and we want to switch to being localhost. My solidjs application is using Vite. So I need to go and search for Vite config, which is right over there, and server options. In order to enable localhost, which it should be by default, I don't know, they are outlining some kind of issue here, but this is the bit that I want to grab that solves the issue of being on localhost. Coming back to Vite config, I'll just place this over here, and then I can restart my application. And now I am on localhost. If I come back to my solid app, let's replace 127 with localhost. And maybe it's thinking I'm on HTTPS, which I'm not. So let's just open it from that proper URL. If I press login now, we're back with the course issue. We now have to switch back to localhost over here. Localhost, perfect. Let's come back, refresh and clear, login. Again, we're successful. However, remember the secure flag. If we go to application, cookies, we should not have a cookie here. If you have this development environment, you need certificates. I'm going to leave a link in the description. This is how you generate certificates for your SPA application. In solidjs, make cert, and then for what domain, localhost, and there you have it. So you should have the certificates over here. You go through the setup instructions of make cert, and you should be all good. You will need to specify your HTTP options over here, and if we're looking at vite config, you should have the HTTPS section over here. If you look through the documentation, you're gonna know what you need to specify. This options object is what we could supply. Here is how it would look like. I'm gonna copy this options object actually, because it's gonna be very convenient. And then in the HTTPS section, I will have my key and cert, and read file async in browsers. It is going to come from the fs namespace, so from fs, and then I will also have a resolve coming from path. File read async, I want to read a file from a path that is going to be resolved, so resolve. For the key, you want the bit that's prefixed with key, like that. Remove this string on the end. And then for the cert, you want a regular file that's not prefixed with anything. So we will just remove the key on the end over here. Come back to the terminal, close this one, we will restart the server. And now we are on HTTPS and localhost. Coming back over here, let's close the other tabs and logged in one too many times. We are again encountering a course issue, and that is because we need to use HTTPS. Cool. Coming back over here, if we refresh, clear, login. Looking over here, we have the cookie, we're secure and we're lax. Inside the application, we are still not going to have a cookie, and that is because when you have cross-origin communication, you need to specify credentials include that you want to be sending these cookies. Just like that. So this is if you're using fetch API. And while I'm here, I'm also going to add my test endpoint method, for which is going to be get, and also a get button. Coming back to the application over here, finally log in. We have the cookie. There we have it. So the cookie will be saved to the browser, and then we call test a couple of times, and it's also automatically attached. Well, not automatically, but in this situation, you need to specify credentials include. This concludes this setup. If you're wondering why this setup would be preferable over the together setup, for the scenario when you're on separate domains, having your development environment closer to that production environment helps a little bit. And the server-side rendered framework example will be a lot like the applications on separate domains. We will need our certificates, and this example is going to be running Nuxt. I'm going to paste the certificates over here. We're going to copy our course configuration to the program.cs file and the middleware. With that set up, let's start our backend. This should have .NET Watch run. Dropping down the terminal, and let me now collapse the separate example that we have over here. The way that you attach the certificates is slightly different in Nuxt. We want to amend this dev command that is going to be running over here and specify an HTTPS flag and pass our certificates, which will look something like this. Having these certificates, npm run dev, we are right at the setup of having our localhost application using HTTPS and on port 3000. Coming back to the application, let's go to app.view. We'll replace Nuxt welcome with our two buttons for test and login, which puts me right around here. Now let's grab the address, which is the protected one, HTTPS 5.11.11. Place this over here, and we want to hit API login here, and the test point on the other one. If we come back to the browser, try to log in. everything should work without any problems. And just to make sure, I don't think I've cleared this cookie. If we do re-log in, we have the cookie, and if we try to call test a couple of times, we should have it no problem as well. The big gotcha with the server-side rendering frameworks is that they have that Node.js backend, and you're gonna have infrastructure for making HTTP requests from your backend to your .NET backend. So what's gonna happen is your browser is gonna send a request to your Node.js backend, and then your Node.js backend is gonna send a request to your .NET backend. You wanna make sure that the cookie is doing that full path and is being retained. Here is how you would do something like this in Nuxt. In plugin, I have init.js, and while we are on the server side, I want to use the fetch API. So $fetch is Nuxt special syntax that basically has the fetch on the browser and the fetch on the backend, which is in the Node.js environment. Notice here that I'm using the HTTP schema URL because if you use HTTPS on the backend, you're going to get a certificate error. And this function should run every single time we initialize. Here I will place console log. And whenever we refresh the Nuxt.js application, nothing should really be printed to the console here. However, it should be printed to the console on in my IDE. What could happen is you could be not authenticated and then you make a call, and then, you need to make sure that you actually have the cookie. So you will have headers, you will extract. So user request headers is a helper function. I have the next application, or essentially the request context over here, which you can extract your Node.js request from here. We will see what this looks like. So console log header. You should see something along the lines of this, where headers are empty, otherwise we would have a cookie. So if header cookie, if that is not there, or rather when it is in there, let's execute this. If it's not there, then don't execute it. Let's come back over here, refresh, and we're good. While I'm gonna be refreshing over here, notice that headers are empty and we're not getting a secret. We log in, we have the cookie, and if I refresh a couple of times, I get a 500 because I've misspelled headers. All right, so let's have that. Come back here, refresh, and this is what the headers will look like when we're logging it here, and then once we're getting the data back. Furthermore, if you're on the server side on your application context, you should be able to reach your request, and this REQ will generally reflect the Node.js request that you have. Okay, so console log, let's have this, refresh, and here you will have the big request where you can essentially find any information about the initial request that is being made, and then propagate whatever parameters reflect your authentication session to the calls that you're making to your .NET backend. That's it for the server-side rendering setup. Let's close all the windows, and as I said, I'm going to show you how you can initialize user information in a single call. For this, we will go to the together example. With the .NET and reactjs application running, what do we want to do? In program CS, after we have authenticated, let's add our custom middleware. Here we'll have the context and the next call. Before we execute the next call, that is really when we want to attach user information. For this, we can go to the context, we will have the user will have an identity, and we can check. If the user is authenticated, let's attach that identity or extract that information. This is pretty simple logic. If you have multiple identities, make sure you put, the if statements that you need. But if we're authenticated, to the context response, cookies is what I'm gonna need to use because this is not server-side rendered. Browser or my JavaScript cannot intercept the response that is gonna be going through my Node.js backend. If that was the case, I would not be adding a cookie, I would be adding a regular header. However, I'm going to be adding a cookie, which is going to be state in the browser, which I'm then going to be able to read. To the cookies, we will append a new cookie, which will contain the user information, and finally a payload that you can serialize. User object to JSON to base64. there's the process, some kind of user, to JSON to base64, and finally user base64 string, attach that to the cookie. That is going to represent your user information. That could be big, so you know, potentially when you load it, you want to clear it, and then you have a user info flag which you're just passing around, okay? So if that is set to true, or you can be even shorter and just say that it's set to 1, a user info dash payload is perhaps what you want to use here. And if context request HTTP or headers, in here you should have cookie. Potentially, if any cookie header has index of more than or equals 0, specifically we're looking for user info. And actually, yeah, right, I want to use contains. If we don't contain a user info cookie value, let's go ahead and deal out user info. Here you can improve your logic by checking specific headers that is going to be attached, or keep dealing out a user session and then start attaching a header if a user session is present, some kind of little one that you can check to not encounter this piece of middleware. And because we don't have HTTP only flags, we should be able to see this cookie from our JavaScript. Let's log in. We'll take a look at the login request. Drop down this console, I don't know what that is. And here we have our set cookie header. Now, if I refresh the application, and by the way, on that first call, when you get the cookie, you will need to get your session. But on the next subsequent localhost request, we have the set cookie over here, and we have the set cookie over here. One is the payload. One is the flag to say, should we keep persisting or requesting the user information? And by the way, it's probably worth calling test a couple of times to see that user information payload and user info is being attached to the request. If we go to console and we say document cookie, we have the information that we want. You can now have a piece of logic that extracts this information and clears the cookie. Coming back to the reactjs application, src, you could probably just place it in the index over here before you attach the root. I don't know about state management conventions in React, or you could have a separate file. Let's try that. In the end, you could end up with something like this, where you use a regular expression to extract the cookie value out of the cookie. Once you have a match, and that's if you have a match, you use the atop function to essentially do base64 decoding out of the match that you have. I'm doing a replace on %3d, which are the equal signs on the end of the string. Once we have the string, JSON parse it, extract the payload, and then clear the cookie. Then in our app.js, we can attempt to import user from init user. This file should run only once, at least that's the behavior in the latest vuejs. I'll place a span over here and grab the username way out of my element here. Hopefully that will slide. Let's refresh, and there we have it, Anton. If I send test, because of the initialization logic, user info is no longer set, and that is actually cleared from the browser. If we come back to the network tab, you can see that user information is not actually, want to be looking here, user information is not attached to the responses. If at any point we do want to clear this user info 1 flag, we can. And then if I come back to network, call test again. On this following call, it doesn't matter if it's an authenticated endpoint or not, because it's in the middleware, we will receive the user information again. However, here, you know, you may need some kind of middleware in your HTTP client pipeline in your JavaScript to process this if you want this approach. Again, if you're in the server-side rendering example, it's a little bit easier because you have that HTTP request header instead of cookies, which are kind of like a cache, basically. So if you need user information, if you don't have it, you can make that initial HTTP request without having a cookie, and then if you have your user information, just start attaching a cookie, which will then prevent the server from generating. With all of that said, please remember this is an optimization technique. You're probably okay with making that additional request, depending on how big your user information is, and you know, if the startup time of your application is a problem, perhaps you can reduce the amount of calls that you're making. by doing something like this. This will be it for this video. Thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to leave a like, subscribe. If you have any questions, leave them in the comment section. If you want to say thank you, come get the source code on my Patreon. The link is in the description. Big thank you to all of my patrons that are already supporting me. Your help is very much appreciated. Goodbye everyone, and have a good day.